Morning, everyone. It is Monday, April 28th, and this is another edition of Marlins Monday. As always, my name is Eric Wiedeke. You can follow me on X/Twitter at Eric Wiedeke, and you can find this show on the 5 Reasons Sports Network YouTube channel. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for all of the great content that 5 Reasons makes. We did a lot of great stuff over the draft. They also do a great job covering the Dolphins, the Marlins, the Heat, the Panthers, the Hurricanes, Inter Miami, you name it. If it's South Florida sports, they've got it on 5 Reasons Sports. I also want to shout out the promo code 5 with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, the best daily fantasy sports platform. Just pick 2 players, more or less, on a given prop and start winning today. Prize Picks. Use promo code FIVE for $50 in bonus funds on your first lineup entry of $5 or more. That is Prize Picks. So I want to get into it right away here for the Marlins this week. 3-3 week, a pretty encouraging series against the Reds, followed up by a series against the Mariners, where you stole one of the games with one of your not great starting pitching options, to put it lightly, and then from there, you really kind of blew the opportunity on Sunday with Max Meyer on the bump against a guy making his first career start. But a 3-3 week for the Marlins nonetheless, so hard to be too negative on it, especially when you have Agustin Ramirez making his debut, and boy, did he make a debut in his first 4 games, or first 6 games rather, a .474 average, a .1658 OPS, 3 homers, 5 runs batted in, 4 doubles. I mean, the guy has been a machine. You could not have planned a better debut for a player. Granted, the defensive issues are real, and believe me, they are evident with Agustin Ramirez, but I don't really know how much that matters, especially when you've got a guy like Joe Mack, who's also seemingly getting closer to being on the horizon than maybe a lot of people had anticipated. Mack off to a torrid start at AAA following his call-up, and he's a much better defensive prospect at catcher. So maybe that long-term issue sorts itself out maybe a little bit quicker than the Marlins had anticipated. But Agustin Ramirez, regardless, just brings a different kind of energy to this order. He's been up for all of 6 games, and he already feels like the most legit middle-of-the-order bat the Marlins have had in years. Since the days of Stanton and Ozuna and Yelich in the middle of the order for the Fish. That's really kind of the kind of talent level that a guy like that kind of harkens back to, at least with the bat, of course. So it's going to be fun to see what he's able to do. I think there's no question that even when Nick Fortes comes back, Ramirez is your everyday catcher. And I think that means pretty good things for the lineup, especially when you consider that you have a guy like Matt Mervis, who's really started to struggle here following, a good little run there in mid-April that saw him, get up to 7 homers, and he was looking like a really solid middle-of-the-order option for the Marlins, but he has kind of fallen back just a little bit here into the pack. I don't, not advocating for the Marlins to DFA him or send him down or anything like that. I don't think it needs to get there just yet with a guy like Mervis. But I do think that maybe he warrants, seeing a little bit of a day off or 2 here in the next coming days. But Agustin Ramirez, he's become a legit middle-of-the-order bat. I don't see how you can keep him out of the lineup right now for this Marlins team. He's the best thing they have going. And speaking of struggling, tangentially related, to Matt Mervis, it's going to be Xavier Edwards. I want to talk about that a little bit because you're seeing kind of the worst parts of Edwards here in the last couple of series. Edwards' his last 7 games, just a dreadful performance and a batting average of 138, an OPS of 315 over his last 7, no steals. It almost makes me wonder a little bit if he's not playing injured. And the only reason why I would say that is I saw him lay down a bunt yesterday in yesterday's ball game, a 7-6 loss against Seattle, and it was a pretty good bunt. It's a play that it's a one that I feel like he would normally beat out with his speed, and he was just not able to get there. And it's not necessarily that he looked like he was, janking it either down the line. He kind of just didn't look as quick as he normally is. So I do wonder maybe if there is something underlying going on there with X. But you're also seeing the downside. I mean, this is a guy with no functional power. Not in the way that he can't hit the ball out of the ballpark. I mean, he just doesn't hit the ball hard anywhere. Even when he gets hits, he's doing it with a lower percentage exit velocity compared to the rest of the league. He doesn't hit the ball hard. And so when he's not finding holes and when he's not being particularly selective at the plate, and he isn't, his strikeout rate is up, he struggles. And I think the Marlins are starting to see that with him. And I think that he might warrant either, being moved down in the batting order or potentially, getting a few days off himself. The Marlins have other options between Javi Sanoa and Ronnie Simon. At least I can spell X for a few days. Again, not advocating for the guy to lose his job or to be DFA'd or sent down or anything like that. But I do think, there needs to be a healthy level of, hey, you're not yourself. Sit down for a couple of days. Let's get this right with X. And I think that needs to be done really with both Marlins middle infielders between him and Otto. And the Marlins have the personnel to do that, again, with the aforementioned Simone and Sonoha up the middle. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up looking for the Marlins here. The last thing that I do want to touch on is, once again, one of the biggest news pieces, I think, of the week here, and, kind of buried the lead a little bit, is Eury Perez on Saturday began a rehab assignment with Single-A Jupiter, throwing 1 scoreless inning, striking out 2, allowing 1 hit. This is, by all accounts, far ahead of schedule for Perez, who as recently as like a week ago, we were being told that he was going to start his rehab assignment in mid-May, which would have placed his return in mid-June. But now I think, you're looking at Perez maybe being 3 to 4 weeks out here, which would put his return in mid to late May for the Marlins. But he wasn't the only Marlins starter to make his his first rehab start. Ryan Weathers followed that up on Sunday with 3 perfect innings, striking out 6 at Single-A Jupiter. Looked about the same with the velocity and the stuff, and by all accounts, Eury did as well on Saturday. And that's going to be particularly of intrigue for Marlins fans to watch, I think, especially as you kind of watch how this next stretch plays out. The Marlins starting a 3-game set against the Dodgers in Chavez Ravine tonight, with Edward Cabrera on the mound going against Dustin May. And that's certainly going to be an uphill battle. And speaking of uphill battles, this Marlins team, of their next 21 games, 12 of which are going to come against the Cubs and the Dodgers, who have a combined record of 35-22. This is a massive test for the Marlins to be playing this many games this quickly against really good teams. The goal here has to be, maybe go 5-7 against these teams and kind of limit the damage that they do to your record in this time frame, because this probably lines up right about with at least Eury Perez's rehab timeline, as this takes you through about May 21st in the schedule. Ryan Weathers should be back before then. And that's an interesting thing here is the Marlins did send down right-hander Connor Gillespie following a disastrous start on Saturday that saw the Marlins lose 14-0 in Seattle. So it seems like there's already kind of a willingness on the part of this front office to cut bait and kind of admit mistakes. Maybe not in the case of Jonah Bride a mistake because he did play well last year, but kind of cut bait with players when they kind of see, hey, listen, this isn't working, and they know that they have suitable replacements ready to go behind those guys. But, you have to think a guy like Quanshaw might be next for the Marlins, and then you start to look at what the rotation could shape up and kind of look like immediately following the return of a Eury Perez or a Ryan Weathers, and it would be something, you have Sandy, Max, Weathers, and Perez, and I understand what Perez will probably be, they've been kind of all systems go with Sandy, full speed ahead. We're not going to place any limits on him. I think they're going to be the opposite with Perez. I think they're going to be very cautious. Given his age and given his importance, I think, to the franchise moving forward now more than ever, especially when you consider that the bats are starting to develop for this team. And so now that you see that, I think that makes Perez as a long-term piece much more important. He's the guy, that they want to kind of build around in the rotation. But I do think for the Marlins here in this upcoming week, as we will see them 3 games versus the Dodgers and then a 3-game homestand versus the Athletics at Loan Depot Park. Again, you're kind of just hoping for another 500 week from this team. Just kind of keep treading water until you get a guy like Ryan Weathers back. And it seems like he might go through maybe 1 or 2 rehab starts before he's ready to make his debut at the big league level this year. And then Eury Perez looks like he might be 3 or 4 or 5 rehab starts away, which would put him way ahead of schedule. And again, it makes this team much more interesting and intriguing in the short and medium term because you don't know what things are going to look like when Perez does come back, what these guys are going to be coming back to for this team. But if they are coming back to a team that's, only a handful of games within 500, the way that this team has kind of handled the bat this year, they've been a much better hitting team than they were last year. And, if they're going to get this kind of start, if they're going to be getting that kind of starting pitching, the kind of players that we expect that Ryan Weathers and Eury Perez can be, then this team becomes a lot more interesting. And I hope that you guys are locked in and stuck in for the ride like we are here. My name is Eric Wiedeke. Once again, you can follow me on X/Twitter at Eric Wiedeke. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube channel and use promo code 5. That's going to be FIVE on Prize Picks. Remember, choose 2 or more players, more or less on any given prop. Play your first lineup of $5 or more and get $50 worth in bonus funds. That's promo code FIVE. Thank you guys so much. We will see you next Monday with another episode of Marlins Monday, breaking down the last week in all the news, notes, and highlights from the last week in Marlins land. My name is Eric Wiedeke. Thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye.